Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone. It's the Friday, January 16th, 2026 episode of the Marco Dure Show. Thank you for tuning in to hear today's groundbreaking news right here in America and across the board, where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Let's begin the best of radio. Informative, uncensored, unapologetic, and ready to go. It's Friday, so you know what that means. It's our weekly economic report. And I want to delve right into that right now before we tackle some other pressing topics on today's show that I think you're all going to really enjoy. Let's talk about the stock market today. Let's not waste any time. Let's dive right into the S&P 500. Doing very well today, trading at $6,926.60, down just barely 0.35%. And they're looking at the index slipping as investors have rotated out of large cap tech and into value stocks amid concerns about the valuations and, of course, into mixed inflation signals that are happening right now. Let's look at the NASDAQ, up 1% today, trading at $23,471.75. Again, all these stocks are up, of course, year over year, so a minor delay in, of course, percentages is not too much of a big deal. But the NASDAQ rose on, of course, strong semiconductor sentiments. We look at the reports for this, and again, major profit jumping, boosting AI-related tech stocks as well, all involved in the NASDAQ. Again, that's why it's performing very well. The Dow Jones jumped up just slightly, 0.086%, trading today at $49,149.63. And again, that's thanks to the strength in bank stocks following an upbeat earnings, of course, from major financial institutions. There you go. Let's jump into oil, shall we? Okay, why not? Oil's a big topic of concern right now, especially in the economy. Everything runs on oil, as you very well know. And right now, Brent crude is trading at $63.35, up slightly, 0.02%. Nothing too great. But it was nearly flat earlier this week. Obviously, we saw some dips, obviously, with the ongoing rift with Iran. And traders balancing geopolitical tensions, of course, against signs of the softening global demand. So think about what's happening with the Middle East, of course, right now. The possibility that Iran could really strike oil refineries all throughout the Middle East. We're talking about striking oil fields as well. And we're talking about global supply being cut off should Iran close down the Strait of Hormuz. Not a good thing. That can send this into turmoil very, very quickly if we don't get roughly a quarter of the world's oil out of that region. So that's something to keep an eye on should the tensions continue between America and Israel and, of course, Iran. And again, I told you something's going to happen at some point. It's just been paused as of right now. All right, let's look at WTI crude. Trading right now at $59.11 per barrel. Let's see here. So WTI dipped slightly as U.S. inventory data pointed again towards the higher than expected supply. You know, when you ask Saudi Arabia, when other countries are producing more oil, then of course you see supply and demand kick in, and obviously with the same amount of demand and more supply, you're going to see that stock drop just a little bit. All right, gold. Another good week for gold. Always and always. Gold ticked up as investors sought safety amid uncertainty in equity markets. And, of course, the talk about the interest rates falling. But gold, another strong week, trading at $4,635.10 an ounce. Look at that. It's fantastic. Again, as we talk about the possibility of interest rates falling, as the interest rates fall, the purchasing power of the dollar will also drop. And what does that mean? It means the price of gold will continue to go up. Never forget what the Trends Journal has shared with us. If gold stabilizes over $4,200 an ounce for several months, it's only going to go up from there. And what are we seeing right now? I told you this back in November of last year. I said if this keeps stabilizing, what they're forecasting is that this is going to continue to go up. And as sure as I'm sitting here, it's continuing to go up, and it's even stabilizing at these very, very high rates. So gold is a winner right now, and really so is silver. So is silver right now. Look at silver, trading at $89.95 an ounce. Now, the silver market fell 3.38% just from last week. And again, that's due to profit taking and, of course, a stronger U.S. dollar weighing in on industrial metals right now. So that's why you're seeing that take place with silver. But again, it's a great investment still. It's still massively up from this time last year. So never a bad thing to invest in either gold or silver. Again, I always tell you, speak with people before you invest in anything. Well, of course, speak with the financial planner. Understand what you're getting involved in. And again, look at the trends. You got to look at the trends, folks. So don't take my word for it. Talk to a professional, as always. Let's look at Microsoft right now. Let's see how our techs are trading this week. We're seeing fairly strong performances. Microsoft trading at $456.66, up 0.26% from this time yesterday. And let's look at Microsoft. Well, they gained modestly. Again, we got to talk about AI. And it's the AI-related optimism that's causing these tech stocks to continue to boost. You know, you have investors rotating back into the mega cap tech after a brief pullback, so you're seeing a lot of these stocks really start to jump up just a little bit. All right, same thing goes NVIDIA, trading firmly, strong earnings and outlooks, signaling continued demand for these chips. Again, NVIDIA's up, trading at $182.22. Very good. Alphabet, same thing. Holding on steady as investors awaited upcoming earnings and digested mixed advertising sector data. Look at that. Alphabet, always doing good. $332.78 per share. Amazon, same concept, $238.18 per share. Amazon, of course, remaining stable as consumers' spending data stayed resilient. Of course, we just came off of the Q4 where we have lots of spending. Thanks to Christmas and other holidays. So lots of spending, lots of gifts, lots of ornaments, all that stuff for Christmas time. And again, you have cloud sector sentiment as well that was improved just recently. So there you go. Micron benefited from the broader semiconductor rally tied to, again, the AI-related demand. So Micron is trading right now at $336.63 per share. Apple, let's see how Apple did. Trading at $259.94. And again, Apple traded sideways as investors weighed slowing iPhone demand against strong services revenue. So a little bit mixed in the market, but overall, the techs are doing very, very well. And again, you're seeing oil take a little bit of a rebound. And of course, our top marginal stocks are, again, performing very, very well, as always. Again, I told you a lot of this is going to be propped up by the AI. The government's looking into prop up AI, just like they're propping up Bitcoin. So, again, those are stocks to consider to look into. Tend to get strong investments. And again, you got to look at the year over year. Everything I've just reported to you, year over year, is pretty much doing double digits percentage-wise increases from this time last year. So the stocks are going up despite a daily, a weekly change, but they're not that drastic. Okay, and of course, we got to look at what's happening globally right now. And again, I told you the oil is going to be the biggest thing to look at. If we decide to go into Iran, and if tensions get very bad there, and should there be a war, you are going to see not only U.S. military bases in the region get hit, but you're also going to see oil refineries all throughout the region getting hit. That's just the way it's going to be. They've warned us. They've said this. So obviously, financiers, investors, businessmen alike are going to kind of halt what they're doing. And of course, the trading for that particular stock. So right now, Brent crude, WTI crude, they're looking obviously a little bleak. And again, I told you before, if if they go below $50, I mean, you're talking about a market crash. So, not the best investment right now. Obviously, the oil oversupply coming out of certain various regions, of course, add to that as well. So we got to keep an eye on what's happening with oil. All right. So again, that's just our stock update for this week. Take that as you will. Again, I always told you the winners every week: gold, silver. We got some tech stocks as well that are continuing to outperform, and they're pretty much safe havens for you. All right, let's move on. Reuters says U.S. import prices increased from September to November. Well, who didn't see this coming? It says here that the U.S. import prices increased 0.4% over 2 months from just September to November, according to the Labor Department's Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's what they reported just yesterday. Now, we looked at the 43-day government shutdown that took place, obviously preventing the collection of this data coming in for October. And as a result, they didn't publish anything in the final months of quarter four. But the monthly changes for a limited number of indexes calculated from non-survey data were eventually published. So we have import prices edged up 0.1% in the 12 months through November. And again, the longest shutdown in history, the 43 days, also prevented the collection of the data for the Consumer Price Index for October. Though data collection for Producer Price Index was not generally affected, the processing was still delayed. So what is this telling us? What is Reuters telling us here? Well, they're telling us the components of the CPI, the Producer Price Index, feed into this calculation of personal consumption expenditures price indexes and the inflation measures tracked by the Federal Reserve for its target 2%, right? So imported fuel prices fell 2.5% over 2 months in that period, ending in November. And they decreased 6.6% in the 12 months through November. Now, that on the face of it sounds good. You're all saying to yourself, look at that. The prices are going down. The tariffs had nothing to do with this. Well, let me just point out to you, I pointed this out yesterday. I'll say it again today. Donald Trump did not put any tariffs on any oil imports coming into the country. So when Liberation Day came around and he announced the initial 10% base rate for all imports coming to the United States back in April of 2025, oil was excluded from all that. And rightfully so. We wanted the price of oil to go down. Why would you put a 10% tax on imports of oil if you're trying to bring the price down? And as we know, the price of oil, it affects everything. Not only what goes into your vehicles, but of course, getting things to various stores across the country. Oil's in 145 different things besides your vehicles. So it affects everything. And of course, the increase in oil will affect how the prices turn out. That being said, they're saying here that food prices fell 0.7% in November after increasing 1.4% in the month of October. Okay, so excluding fuels and food, import prices advanced 0.9% in 12 months through November, reflecting the dollar's depreciation against the currencies of the United States trade partners. And of course, the trading weighted dollar fell about 7.2% in 2024. What did I tell you? We saw the inflation. We saw roughly 3% inflation from December 2025 to 2024 to December 2025. So that increased after Biden had left office. And again, the U.S. Central Bank is expected to keep its benchmark overnight interest rate in the 3.5 to 3.75% range. So it doesn't look like they're going to give us that cut that they had been forecasting. Again, even as businesses are absorbing most of the tariffs, it's still preventing a massive inflation spike. But that doesn't mean you're not paying more. That's the problem. They're rising, but they're rising slightly. And the Fed sees this, so that's why the Fed is probably not going to make cuts anytime soon. If they were going to make the cut, they should have done that earlier in 2025. But again, the reason why you're seeing the import prices increase is simply because of the instability in the market. Number one, people don't know if Donald Trump is going to raise tariffs, drop tariffs. We don't know what's going to happen. Now we're trying to put a 25% tariff on anyone that does business with Iran. So think China, think Russia, right? Venezuela, obviously those countries. So everything that comes in from China is going to have now a 25% tariff put on it? Is that how it's going to be? We take a lot of things in from China. Roughly 32% of our imports come directly from China. And that's going to have a huge impact on the market, of course, your overall CPI, folks. So we got to take a look into that and take that into consideration if Donald Trump follows through with it. Now, he could scrap it. We don't know. These things are always up in the air. Sometimes he wants to put on a 150% tariff. Sometimes he says, we'll wait. We'll go through negotiations. So all these things change as time goes on. Nothing, of course, is ever set in stone. But this article in Bloomberg also kind of forecast what's happening right now, telling us that the Fed officials are back a rate cut pause now. And that kind of just goes into what I was saying as inflation concerns linger. So here we go. We have several Federal Reserve officials speaking Thursday, signaling a willingness to pause the interest rates cuts that they were discussing as the upcoming policy meeting takes place, and again citing labor markets that appear to be stabilizing and ongoing inflation pressures. Why are they talking about this? Well, number one, if we go to war with Iran, that's going to have an effect on the dollar. It just is. There's going to have to be more money printed out. Obviously, you're going to have the oil prices. I just told you this. If oil is affected by this and the price of oil starts to skyrocket, that's going to affect inflation as well. Now, the 5 presidents of the regional Fed banks, who recently in months have found themselves on opposite sides of the policy debate, indicated that the U.S. Central Bank is now well positioned to wait for more data before acting again. Okay, so what is that data? What's going to happen in this war? That's what they're saying in a nutshell. Now, they're not saying it outright, but that's what they're talking about. And make no mistake, if we do go to war with Iran, if we do invade Greenland, or if we purchase Greenland for $700 billion, where's that money coming from? It's coming from the Fed. They're going to have to print more money in circulation, more U.S. dollars, same amount of goods. You know what that means. Supply and demand, prices are going to go up. If Trump follows through with his 25% tariff on anyone doing business with Iran, you're going to see prices starting to go up. Because, again, those imports are going to carry 25% more. Yes, the businesses are trying to eat up a lot of that percentage, so their prices are competitive on the markets here in America. But the overall, at some point, folks, they can only eat it up for so long. You can't keep taking a profit loss in what you're selling. Otherwise, they're simply not going to sell here. One of the two things has to happen. Either they don't sell here, or the prices start to go up. And that's what you're going to see here in America. So, that being said, of course, the comments follow reports over last week showing the unemployment rate ticked down to 4.4% in December. Again, down from 4.6% earlier, just the previous month, halting a sting of increases in the previous months, and of course inflation data suggesting that the Fed's preferred measure may still be closer to 3%, a full percentage point above its target. So maybe they changed the goalpost. We don't know. But the important thing is that facing us, of course, is they want to get inflation back to a controlled 2%. That's what Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee said on Thursday in an interview with CNBC concerning, of course, coming from businesses across his across his district over rising costs and affordability rates. Again, there's the word affordability. Are things becoming more affordable or less? Well, I just told you. 3% inflation across the board would suggest otherwise, because it's not keeping up with the wage increases. That's a problem. All right, so we got to keep an eye, folks, on this war and this conflict. Again, these all have a big play on, of course, the dollar and how it does. Obviously, oil, what's happening in Venezuela right now. So there's lots of things at play right now in the market. Again, this instability in the world economy, in the global economy, has a role to play on inflation here in the United States, and that's just the way it's going to be. Again, we rely heavily on imports because we don't manufacture enough here, and as a result, the market's at play. So we need to keep an eye on all this. I don't think many people are going to expect another rate cut before June, though. That's what investors are predicting right now, according to this Bloomberg article. And they're going to have to take a look at these things, and maybe by then, if Jerome Powell is ousted, as we imagine he will be, I think Trump will replace him. But as a result of that, I don't think you're going to see anything happen, probably from Powell and his remaining time at the Fed, unless, of course, inflation begins to drop, and I don't see any signs of that happening. So I think we're going to have to see a new Fed chair. They're already talking about bringing some guy in from BlackRock. I mean, it's ridiculous, of course, but they're going to get someone to play ball with, of course, lowering the interest rates and, again, try to get the economy to expand that way. So that's what we'll see as a result of that. All right, folks, so that's the economy this week. Stable, possibly, but, again, unsure because of, again, these conflicts, of course, happening, particularly with Iran, could heat up sometime soon. I can't, I don't have a crystal ball to, look into, of course. But something is going to happen in the Middle East. And to what extent, we don't know. We don't know how President Trump will react. But again, if there is an attack on Iran, you're going to see lots of chaos with, again, the oil industry. You're going to see, obviously, Israel being affected by this. And, of course, our military bases in the region. And anytime you go to war, it's going to cost more money. Again, more money out there, more dollar bills printed. You're going to see inflation occur as a result of that. And again, our looming national debt, which is now, $38.4 trillion right now, and it's only going to continue upwards from there. All right, folks, this is in the Associated Press. Says Venezuela's new leader calls for opening oil industry to foreign investment and warmer U.S. ties. Well, she wants to stay in office. That's what it comes down to. She wants to stay in office. And she'll play ball with President Trump. That's what it seems to me. And again, it just shows me that this whole, drug enforcement, the narco-terrorist terminology and smears to Venezuela we're simply just trying to get a new leader in position to play ball with the United States. It says here that Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, used her first State of the Union message Thursday to advocate for opening the crucial state-run oil industry to more foreign investment following President Trump's administration pledge to seize control of the state's crude oil sales. So she doesn't want to get ousted, obviously. She wants Maduro back. Whether that happens, we have no idea. By the way, haven't you heard nothing from this whole case happening? Nothing's happening right now. Maduro's barely even mentioned. They mentioned it in jest, of course, and of course in passing, that obviously he was ousted. But the talk about this trial is simply falling apart for the simple reason that, again, the idea that he was the leader of this drug cartel is completely baseless. The fact that that Venezuela's drugs are poisoning Americans left and right, that's again another falsity, falling in and of itself on its head. And of course these bogus machine gun charges, that he owns a machine gun in Venezuela, therefore he's breaking the law here in the United States. Again, baseless. I don't know what Pam Bondi's doing, but I don't think it's going to go over well if there's any real jurors on this case. So we'll see what happens there. But for the first time, Rodriguez now laid out a vision for Venezuela's new policy reality. One of the challenges that her government now faces, of course, is the deeply rooted beliefs that less than 2 weeks ago, after the United States captured and toppled the former President Nicolas Maduro, of course, the government is still largely intact, but now she's going to be the new interim leader and possibly the new president of the country. Depending on what happens to Maduro, do we release him? Do we find him guilty? Is he found innocent? Does he go back and become president? It's all up in the air. But now under new pressure from the United States, of course, and they've spoken briefly, I believe, is that they want her to cooperate with, again, the Venezuelan so-called U.S. sanctioned oil. And, of course, Maduro's former vice president declared that a new policy is now being formed inside Venezuela. So I don't think they want the coup in the sense that they're going to topple the entire regime. I told you before, I believe this was a decapitation strike. It's getting someone to, again, play ball. So I don't think it's going to be we own everything, but I think it's going to be, we're going to take what we want sort of business. I think that's the way it's going to be. So she urged foreign diplomats in attendance to tell investors abroad about the changes and called on the lawmakers to approve oil sector reforms that would secure foreign firms access to Venezuela's vast reserves. So what does that mean? It means they're going to open up the oil industry to the world now. So in other words, they're not going to nationalize their oil anymore. That's what it comes down to. They're going to open up to foreign investors and do it that way. Kind of how it was before Hugo Chavez nationalized it back in 2007. So Venezuela, in free trade relations with the world, can sell the products of its energy industry, is what she said. And again, they're sitting on, 303 billion barrels of oil? So quite a bit. The Trump administration said it has plans now to control the future oil export revenues to ensure its benefits come to the Venezuelan people. And that's what he's saying. Of course, how long is that going to take? What's the process? Nobody knows. I told you before that Pepe Escobar said that to get this type of investment, to get 3 million barrels of oil out of the ground in Venezuela each day, again, it wouldn't even come close to the top 10 countries in the world, despite, of course, being an OPEC producer. But you're going to have to invest somewhere around $183 billion over the course of 15, 16 years. Just to even start getting it up to that range. Okay, so the fact that there's this massive oil deposit, these massive oil reserves in the Orinoco oil belt there in Venezuela, no doubt. But to get this crude oil, it's the thickest oil in the world. I mean, you got to pump it out of the ground. That's how thick it is. It's not like you're watching There Will Be Blood and you see them like break oil and then it just shoots right in the sky. That's not that kind of oil they have in Venezuela. It's very, very thick. It's contaminated. It's got to be desulfurized. I mean, there's a whole big process before they can even ship it to be refined even further. And these refineries only exist in a couple places in the United States. So there's that issue. And of course, you got to truck it by oil tanker, another big issue because it's not going through a pipeline like the Canadian Alberta crude that comes into the United States that way. So there's all these issues in place here. They're having trouble with getting various people to invest in it. ExxonMobil does not want to take that task on its own. We heard that their CEO saying just earlier this week that it's uninvestable in Venezuela. But that's not something President Trump wanted to hear. Now, of course, everyone's saying that, this is going to be a great investment. We're going to get 30 to 50 million barrels of oil. Well, over what amount of time? To get 50 million barrels of oil, it's going to take roughly 70 plus days to get it here to the United States. And then, of course, you got to take the task of refining it from there. There's many different processes that take place. So it's not going to be every single day you're getting 50 million barrels of oil. And again, the statement that they're setting us 30 to 50 million barrels is what Trump said. He didn't provide a timeline for that. Everyone thinks, they're just setting it right now. That's what people think. They don't really look into these stories. They think right away it's going to be coming to the United States. Well, folks, that's going to take, again, based on the people I listen to, at least 71 days to get that much oil, 50 million barrels, to the United States. Right now, they're only producing roughly 934,000 barrels a day, I think is the latest estimate. I heard as low as 750,000 barrels. So let's just pretend it's somewhere in that realm. You're looking at over 70 days to get that much oil to the United States. So it's not overnight. They're not going to send us 50 million barrels of oil. That's just not how it's going to work. So in that vein, Rodriguez described cash from the oil sales flowing into the two sovereign wealth funds, one to support crisis-stricken health services and another to bolster public infrastructure inside Venezuela. Much of that was built under Maduro's predecessor, Hugo Chavez, but has since deteriorated. So again, folks, this isn't a get-rich-quick scheme. It's not it doesn't even seem like a lucrative business deal at the moment, of course. But if they want to get Venezuela to, again, produce 3 million barrels of oil per day, you're going to have to invest heavily. And what business is going to take up that task? I don't know. We don't even know if that's going to happen. Maybe they keep the existing infrastructure. We don't know. Now, while Rodriguez has criticized the United States' capture of Maduro, referring to it as a stain on our relations, she also promoted the resumption of diplomacy between the two adversaries. In her sushi and 44-minute speech and mollifying tone marked the dramatic contrast to her predecessors' fiery rants against the United States imperialism that often went on for hours. So obviously there's going to be some tension between the two nations. I don't imagine the Venezuelan people, again, based on what I've seen, are all happy about this. Again, it's not one size fits all, folks. Just like in the United States, it's not one size fits all. You can look at the protest happening in Minneapolis right now. Are you going to say, based on that the Donald Trump administration is over? The United States has had enough of President Trump? Of course you wouldn't say that. And that goes for Maduro, too. Yeah, you had millions of people on the streets of Venezuela asking for his return. So, again, it's not one size fits all. Again, just like what you see in Tehran. Everyone's saying everyone in the streets is obviously against the Ayatollah Khomeini and that they obviously want to topple the government and the government's days away from collapse. And, of course, we know now, again, most of you know because you listen to my show, that was a bunch of nonsense. It's junk. It's fodder for the brain. None of that was true. And like in the United States, same thing happening in Tehran. You have paid protesters causing chaos in the streets. You have strife. You have buildings set on fire, cars set on fire. You have people attacked. It's a horrible situation. But it's not indicative of the entire population. It's a very big population in Iran. 91 plus million people live there. And while you have lots of people, tens of thousands in the streets calling for, the overturn of the government, it's not always indicative of the entire population. I told you before, the CIA came out. They were largely involved in what was happening, along with Mossad. And once that communication between the rioters and the CIA and Mossad ended, you saw those protests die right out. And that's what you're seeing right now. The protests in Iran are dying out. And that's why President Trump couldn't act on that. So we've got to take everything into consideration, put it in context. Not everyone in Venezuela wants Maduro gone. It's just the way it seems to be. Now, it appears that Rodriguez wants to maintain her position, and she wants to, of course, remain as president because she believes that, obviously, they're in charge of the government, and they don't want to see regime change. They don't want the government to be toppled. So, again, it appears that this is going to be maybe at the start of a more positive relationship, and maybe President Trump goes along with it. But since Maduro's ouster, Trump has frozen Machado now out of discussions about being the president. We're going to talk about her momentarily, too. This is funny. She was just at the White House yesterday. But again, he's praising what Rodriguez is doing. Again, calling her a terrific person and what have you. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how this plays out. I don't think there's going to be a coup as we see it. I think we're just going to see this decapitation strike. Maybe Maduro is given a plea and he doesn't return to Venezuela, but he gets to live wherever the hell he wants. I don't know. But again, I can't see the trial going and finding him guilty of really anything they're accusing him of. And again, that just goes to show you the bombing of the fishing boats in the Caribbean, the terms narco-terrorism. That's all died out now. Have you noticed that? It's all died out in the news. You hear nothing about this. No one's saying a word about it. So you're telling me Maduro's gone, and yet the drug operations have just ceased around the world? The Colombian coke is not coming through Venezuela to the United States anymore? Well, that's because it never was. It's all going to West Africa and Europe. So again, it's funny in a sense that it's so ridiculous that we're pretending that Venezuela's in charge of this entire drug operation, this coke operation in the United States, and fentanyl, which never even came out of Venezuela. Yet we leave Mexico completely out of it, which, again, every single drug under the sun that comes to the United States comes in from Mexico. So just keep that in mind, folks. Now, I want to talk to you about something hilarious now. And it just goes to show you how desperate this Machado woman is. This is out of the New York Post. And it says here, Venezuelan opposition leader María Corina Machado reveals why she gave Trump her Nobel Peace Prize medal. Because she wants to be president. That's what she thought was going to happen. I give you this peace prize. I'm going to give it to you, Donald, because you're a man of peace. Despite the fact you killed over, 111 people in the Caribbean thus far. You've stolen 6 different oil tankers, which is piracy. You created a decapitation strike on the government of Venezuela. You've threatened Greenland, Mexico, Nicaragua, Colombia, Cuba. Now we're talking about going to war with Iran. I mean, it's ridiculous to talk about peace at a time like this, especially coming from the White House. But nonetheless, she met with President Trump, and she gifted him with the Nobel Peace Prize. And I'm looking at a picture right now, the two of them smiling. And, it's because she wants to become president. That's what it comes down to. Now, she said because he deserves it. Okay, all right, he deserves it. All right. And it was a very emotional moment, is what she said. Okay, very emotional. Imagine giving away your Nobel Peace Prize, though. That's another thing. That just goes to show you how meaningless the prize really is. Now, she's called Venezuelan's Iron Lady. And again, she was awarded last year the Nobel Peace Prize, this past October, in recognition of her efforts to promote democracy in her home country. And it says here that she praised President Trump for what he's doing to liberate Venezuela and for freedom in the Americas. Now, let's again stop. Let's pretend that was true. Let's pretend Maduro was the end-all, be-all. He was the brutal dictator that everyone tells you he was. Okay, I'm fine with that. Let's go with that. Well, folks, the entire government is still intact around Maduro, right? Delcy Rodriguez wants him back. She's in an alliance with him. She's a socialist, just like he is. All the cabinet is the same way. The military, everyone in the intelligence community, every single thing is in lockstep. So it'd be like saying President Trump was arrested and detained in, I don't know, we'll say Venezuela, just for the sake of the argument. Well, folks, we still have everything functioning amid the Trump administration right now. Just because President Trump is out of the loop doesn't mean the government doesn't function. And it's the same way in Venezuela. So this idea that because Maduro's gone and his wife is gone, that everything is completely done at 180, it hasn't. Everything is still in full effect. You just have Rodriguez now playing ball with the oil industry. And it seems like they're going to open up to investors, and that's what President Trump wanted. He wanted the oil. And he also wants other resources as well. It's a very resource-rich country. We want access to it. That's what it comes down to. It's all about the oil. It has nothing to do with Maduro per se, except he wasn't playing ball with it. He still had the oil nationalized like Hugo Chavez did. So this liberating Venezuela, what's changed? What's changed since January 3rd in Venezuela? Is there unlimited freedoms now throughout Venezuela that we don't know about? Did Delcy Rodriguez announce any new Bill of Rights emulating the United States in Venezuela? I don't know about it. Is there no poverty in Venezuela? And again, you have to ask yourself these questions. Is that true? Of course it's not true. Everything is exactly the same, except we're now buying oil from them. That's what it comes down to. And by the way, we were buying oil from them last year too, by the way. So what it comes down to is they want ExxonMobil, they want ConocoPhillips, they want Chevron, all these companies to come in and start buying pieces of the oil industry, and they want to start profiting from it. That's what it comes down to. Just ask Paul Singer. All right. Anyways, I thought this was funny. It means nothing, really. A Nobel Peace Prize. After Obama won it, I mean, it was pretty clear that it's meaningless. And it's still meaningless when this woman won it. This is the same woman. I'll tell you this. She actually caused strikes against military bases inside Venezuela. That got people killed. And that's what this woman did. This is who she's an agitator. That's what she is. And now she's, of course, opposite of Maduro. So Donald Trump likes her. But this is the same woman who asked Benjamin Netanyahu to have Israel come in and perform a invasion and install her as president. And she's the same woman who said that put her in position, she'll give you everything you want. You want the oil, Donald? We'll take it. You want gold reserves? Take it. Just keep me rich and keep me in power. That's who this woman is. Just so we're clear on this. And while I could continue to read to you the things she says, I wanted to convey this to him and for him to know how much support and hope there is today in Venezuela regarding what he's doing in our country. What's he doing? He's done nothing, really. What else is done? He's illegally abducted the president of the country. That's it. That's what it is. Nothing else has changed in Venezuela, as far as I'm concerned. I haven't heard anything. Now, while people are shouting liberty at times and of other places in the country for Venezuela, is that what's happening? And of course, the answer is no. Nothing else has changed in this country. They still have the same socialist government in effect. They're just playing ball with the oil. So I just wanted to bring this up to you. I thought it was hilarious. She gave away her Nobel Peace Prize. I don't think we'll hear much of this woman anymore. He doesn't seem to be backing her in any real extent to install her as president. So I think that kind of went away. And I think that's what she was hoping for with this gesture to give him the Nobel Peace Prize he so coveted that she received. Anyways, let's move on. We got some issues happening still in Minnesota, coming out of Minneapolis, of course. This is in the Washington Times. And the question about is Trump going to use the Insurrection Act coming more spoken about in recent days. They don't seem to be ceasing. It seems to be getting worse. There's more interaction between, obviously, ICE and the people in the streets. I brought up to you that woman who was, it appeared to be, and I haven't heard anything different, she was driving her car through an intersection, and you see ICE trying to tell her what to do. I don't know if she was confused. I don't know if she was intentionally trying to block traffic, but they ended up taking her out of the vehicle. And while they're cuffing her, she's saying, I'm going to a doctor's, I have a disability, and they're arresting this woman for everybody to see. So there's chaos on the streets. There's people in the streets, which they have no right to be in the streets. And the rhetoric against ICE now is ramping up. So the question is President Trump going to come in? Is he going to do something? Is he going to put this to rest? We don't know. But now the article calls for these anti-ICE groups are now calling to attack federal agents and saying, be willing to get kicked in the teeth. That's nice, isn't it? Sound like a peaceful protest to you? Obviously it's not. And this is not going to stop, folks, because these people are well-funded, just like I told you what took place in Iran, right? It's the same thing, same situation. So we have an anti-ICE activist group inside Minnesota right now. And the protester, it's beyond a protest. It's a riot. These are rioters. They're not protesters. Protests are peaceful. Protests are lawful. This is not lawful. Okay, causing and acting on violence, acting to aggressively step up efforts to obstruct federal ICE enforcement by officers and physically harming them and impeding what they're doing is not peaceful, folks. This is what this entire thing last week set off. So it says there, every time a cop attempts to make an arrest, they are required to do so with fists and legs and bats and rocks, hitting them until they either give up or until a full-scale riot breaks out. That's what it says here. Either way, they will pay for every single person they put their hand on. That's what the organizer posted on Instagram. And under the headline, "Don't Film, Act. A Call for Confrontation." This is ridiculous. This is a call to violence. And by the way, is it taken off of Instagram? Inciting violence against federal agents? We can have a conversation on the legality about what ICE does. And by the way, the majority of people they have arrested some Americans. I believe 170 total of the entire, I think it was 900,000 people they arrested back in 2025. So again, we can talk about the due process and the procedure and everything and what have you. But the idea that ICE is conducting raids is not illegal. It's not. Now, again, I told you before, I think they should have due process. I think they shouldn't just be going into businesses and asking people for their papers. I find that it is illegal. It's illegal. Any way you look at it, that's illegal. If I'm walking down the street right now and some ICE car pulls up to me and says, "Show me your ID, show me your papers," they have no right to do that. Now, if they go into a business and say, "Let me see who's on your roster, who's working for you, how many people do you have working for you?" That's a different situation. Because now you have to account for the people that are working for you. Well, who is that gentleman? Where is he? What? Oh, well, I don't know. You have people working on the table for you, for cheaper labor. That's a bit of a different situation. And there are ways for them to find this out prior. But they should have, again, if we're going by the law, what they should have is a court-ordered response to go into a said home and a said business to detain a particular person of interest. That's what it should be. They should already know who they are going to detain. Okay? That's the way it works. It shouldn't be the show me your papers nonsense. That's ridiculous. It's unconstitutional. Any way you spin it, if someone's here legally or illegally, doesn't matter. There needs to be due process with what's happening with ICE. And sometimes we are simply not seeing that. You know, going to a business and just arresting people. No, that's not the way things should be working. Okay, so we need to be clear on that aspect of it too. Now, do people have the right to protest? That's the next question. Yes, they do. But a protest is not standing in the streets. It's not obstructing. It's not blowing air horns or whistles in police ear. It's not attacking police or throwing rocks at them or their vehicles or shooting at them, like what we saw in Chicago last year. That's completely illegal. So is the turmoil going to produce the Insurrection Act now? That's the big question here. Because now you have groups that are actively calling for violence against federal agents, against the federal government. Now, we know Tim Walz is not going to do a damn thing about it. We know that Jacob Frey certainly isn't going to do a damn thing about it. So now the question is, what do we do now? Do we allow ICE to get attacked? When they're detaining somebody, do they get punched in the face? Do we allow this? Do we allow them to just handle it themselves? What do we do? Because the Post is clearly calling for a break in civil society. That's what it's coming down to. And that's a major problem. I think we all can agree on that. I hope so. So anyways, let's talk further. Let's talk further. If Donald Trump pushes the Insurrection Act, right? If he goes through with this, is this legal? Can he do this? And the answer to that is absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I'll tell you why, too, because, again, there are some reasons where the president has to get the governor of the state's said approval. There are situations where that's not always the case. So, for example, when is a government supposed to get a governor's approval required by law under the Constitution? So if President Trump were to deploy the National Guard under Title 32 in that statute, he has to get the governor's approval to send them in. So when he sent them into Los Angeles, he had to get Gavin Newsom's approval. Of course, he's not going to get it, so therefore it's illegal. That's just the standard. That's how you cooperate with the National Guard inside a said state. Again, when a state also requests federal military assistance, like a natural disaster or a large-scale emergency, for example. Let's say you had, like the 94 Northridge earthquake in Southern California, in the valley. That's a way for the state to request, obviously, federal military assistance. Okay, that's how you coordinate with the government. Same thing here. Major events where a state seeks help, that's when you send in the National Guard. You have to have the governor's approval to do such a thing. When it is not required, though, that's the big question here. Is this required or not? He doesn't need Tim Walz's approval under the Insurrection Act. The president may deploy active duty military. National Guard, of course, federalized under Title 10 without the governor's consent. So when can he do this? Okay, when the federal law cannot be enforced normally. So, for example, if the Minneapolis police, if the state police are, not going to come in, they tell in fact, Jacob Frey is telling them to arrest ICE agents, which again is ludicrous in and of itself. But when can he do it? So again, when the federal law cannot be enforced normally. So can ICE go out and do their job? It seems like it's getting to a point where they're going to be fighting with people, these rioters, these agitators, these criminals in the streets. Anytime there's a constitutional right being obstructed, right? So, for example, if you have people in the streets, they're burning, they're looting, things of that nature, all these things are a major problem. And anytime where you're calling for active insurrection, rebellion, any widespread violence occurring, which, again, we may start to see very, very soon, the president does not need the state government's approval to bring in the military. And we've seen this in the past in America, for example. We could talk about the desegregation in the 1950s and 60s in America. You could talk about how Eisenhower sent him into Little Rock, right? Orville Faubus would not allow it to be desegregated, and Eisenhower said, yeah, well, we're going to send in the military now to ensure this happens. He did not need his permission to send them in. And these things happen time and time in America. Many of the times, for example, when we had the LA riots back in 92 over the Rodney King issue, you had Governor Pete Wilson, of course, approve of the Bush administration to send in the military to obviously bring back some sanity into the streets of LA. And of course, after a few days, everything was back to, well, I guess normal if you want to call it that, but the riots subsided. Now, there's an opportunity where you had the state government in sync, of course, with the federal government. Pete Wilson, of course, approved and requested the use of the military to come in to put an end to this. Tim Walz is not going to do that, just so we're all clear on this. Jacob Fry is not going to allow police to come in and arrest violent protesters. He's not going to do that. Or, excuse me, rioters, I should say. It's not going to happen. So we've got to ask ourselves these questions. Is this going to happen? And probably at some point it's going to have to happen. These people are lawless. They're not following the Constitution. They don't have a right to do what they are doing. They don't have a right to be in the streets. I told you that before. Unless, of course, you get a permit from the city government that you're going to be on that street marching for that said time. It's done in advance, and it's, corralled in such a way. But you don't have a right to just be in the streets, or be in the freeways, or block traffic, or burn things, or attack people, or shoot people. You don't have a right to do that. That ceases to be a protest. Now, the media might spin it as a peaceful protest. We've seen that before. That's a bunch of nonsense. But this is not legal, what's happening right now. And it's getting worse and worse by the day in Minneapolis. But President Trump warned Thursday that he would invoke the Insurrection Act to deploy the military in Minnesota if protesters continue to attack federal agents carrying out immigration raids. And again, he rightfully blamed Minnesota's political leadership for this escalation of violence. He's absolutely right about it. They are the ones pouring this fuel on this fire. It got all out of control because of what their actions were, or their lack of actions. And again, if the corrupt politicians of Minnesota don't obey the law, and again, stop these professional, paid-for agitators, and calls for insurrection, then Trump is probably going to be sending in the military, is what it seems to be, based on what he said in a Truth Social post. Now, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison responded to President Trump by threatening to challenge the insurrection in court. Well, again, your state has got to get everything under control then. That's what it comes down to. You have refused to do that. And by the way, he knows this too. Now, Ellison has already filed a lawsuit against the administration to stop the surge of federal agents in his state. Again, he has to know the law. It's called the Supremacy Clause, folks. The federal government can come into a state and carry out federal law. It is a federal law, immigration. It is not a state law. Now, the state can cooperate with the federal government. We've seen sane, functioning Republican governors like Ron DeSantis, Kevin Stitt of Oklahoma. They work with ICE. They can do that. That's fine. But when in Minnesota, for example, when they've arrested some of these illegal aliens, what do? They don't cooperate with ICE. Or they put them back out on the streets. So now it makes ICE's job more difficult to go and do this. If the state played ball with the Constitution and, of course, federal law, we wouldn't be having these problems. By the way, Obama, Clinton, they deported illegal aliens. We never heard any of this from them, did we? From CNN, from ABC, from any of these news organizations. Joyless Reed wasn't running her mouth then, was she? I didn't hear about this. No. The ladies on The View didn't have a word about it. But now because President Trump is doing it, it's all of a sudden a big deal. So we have to see what happens here. It says here, Tim Walz said on X, not that anyone listens to him anymore, but he said, I'm making a direct appeal to the president. Let's turn the temperature down. Stop this campaign of retribution. This is not who we are. First of all, this is who you are. You're the one that is seeking the retribution by not following the law. An illegal alien does not have a right to be in this country. End of story. And when they come out and say these are our neighbors, protect your neighbors, look what this fascist government's doing, they heat up the rhetoric, of course, against ICE agents in particular, which is why you see a 1,300% increase on violence against them. Ted Waltz is fine with it. It's okay. He doesn't care. Anything to do with the Trump administration, he will disavow. So, again, I think we can expect that this is going to happen. It's going to happen. The Insurrection Act has only been invoked 30 times throughout the 250-year history in the United States, but it's going to happen again if things continue to get out of hand like what we're hearing about. Obviously coming from these calls to violence, again, not protests, but calls to violence against ICE agents. That's just the way it's going to probably turn out, is what I can see, at least. All right, folks, let's move on quick. I do have a couple more things I'd like to go over before we jump into our weekend, of course. Let's do this one. Okay, this one might be quicker for us, but this is how the Gateway Pundit says that President Trump has announced Board of Peace for Gaza is officially now formed. And again, I don't know what he's talking about because we still haven't succeeded in creating any type of stability since the ceasefire took place. We've seen over 400 Palestinians killed since that time. I don't know if we can call it a ceasefire. But he announced a Board of Peace, which will be headed by and chaired by himself in his 20-point Gaza peace plan that he initiated last September. But on Thursday, he announced that the board has been finalized and the members will be announced shortly. And he said, I can say with certainty that this is the greatest and most prestigious board ever assembled at any time, any place. Oh, of course it is. Anything President Trump does is the greatest ever at any given time in history. Now, he said in his full statement, he said, it is my great honor to announce that the Board of Peace has been formed and the members of the board will be announced shortly. So we have to hear if Tony Blair, I guess, will be the viceroy or governor of the Gaza Strip. I have no idea. And again, this comes after a special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, announced that the launch of Phase 2 of the Gaza Peace Plan, where Gaza is set to be redeveloped for the benefit of the people of Gaza, who have suffered more than enough. Well, yeah, at the hands of who? At the hands of the IDF, and of course, Netanyahu. They failed to mention that, of course. I'm not sure how you advance to a second phase when clearly Israel hasn't held a bit end of the bargain. And by the way, Hamas is not disarmed before you have any sort of, I guess, insurance that there will be peace on both sides. So again, how do you have Hamas give up their arms when you have the IDF still killing Palestinians in the streets behind this imaginary line that they're supposed to be behind? Why are they still in the region? They're not even supposed to be in the region. They're supposed to have been evacuated. Yet they're still continuing airstrikes. They're still bombing. They're still shooting at people. And they're still killing people every single day. Now, the last figure I got was there was 411 Palestinians killed since this ceasefire, or so-called ceasefire. I don't know how you move on to Phase 2. Phase 2 is supposed to establish a transitional, technocratic Palestinian administration inside Gaza. And this National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, that's what it's called. And it's supposed to begin the demilitarization and reconstruction of Gaza, which again, over 80% of the country is lying in ruins. The primary and disarmament of all unauthorized personnel. That would be Hamas. So the U.S. then expects Hamas to fully comply with this obligation, again, including the immediate return of the final deceased hostage, and failure to do so will bring serious consequences. Well, the problem is we don't even know where this hostage probably is. They could be buried under rubble, like so many Palestinians are. We don't know. And again, why wouldn't they comply with delivering a deceased person? That's a big question. And the other question is, will the remaining hostages that are Palestinian, sitting in Palestinian jail, be released as well? Why not? If we're swapping political prisoners, why would we not expect the same from Israel? And if Hamas is going to demilitarize, if they're going to hand over their guns or put their guns down, I guess I would say that is probably the best you're going to get from them. The idea that they would give up all their arms would be really a death sentence for the entire region. Unless, of course, President Trump is going to ensure that no other Palestinian is killed somehow, or the Gulf Arab states can ensure that. I don't know that they can. I don't think you're going to see them turn over their weapons. Certainly just not yet. So, I say this with hope that there, could at some point be some sort of at least peace between the two vying territories. I don't think that we're going to see this unless you really get some real actors assure the Palestinians that they can actually live freely the way they want to be ruled. They don't want to be ruled over by other people. That's what it comes down to. So I don't think they want to live in a police state governed by another foreign country. I think they want to govern themselves. That's what I believe. And just before we end today's show, I know we're out of time now. This is an all Israel news. And it says that Ben Gvir's party finalizes death penalty for terrorist bill, seeks to hang terrorists within 90 days of sentencing. Now, that's interesting. This is coming out of the West Bank. And the bill distinguishes between the death penalty for terrorists in what they call is Judea and Samaria. We call it the West Bank. So will these political prisoners that they claim are terrorists, these Palestinian terrorists, will they just be executed? Will they be given due process? Now, this still has to go through, obviously, law. It has to become law first. But they're saying that the death sentence would be carried out within 90 days of a ruling. And attendance at the execution would include the prison warden, a judicial representative, and an official witness, and a representative of the terrorist's family. Okay, so, again, if someone has committed a crime, obviously they should be held accountable for it. But who are we calling the terrorists? Are we calling all Palestinians terrorists? Are we calling just the political prisoners that are held without charge? Are we calling them terrorists? What is the due process going to look like? Who will be sitting on the juries that convict these people that allow the state of Israel to kill them? And again, in the territory of the West Bank, which is supposed to be a region where Israel is not supposed to be in, by the way. Look at Article 242 in the UN Charter, by the way. So, again, are we supposed to coexist? Are we going to allow Israel to have authorization over the region, which, again, they're not supposed to be inside Gaza, and they're not supposed to be inside the West Bank? And by the way, who are some of these terrorists? Are these the terrorists that have been killing people? These Israeli settlers that are, again, burning down olive trees and setting fire to the St. George Cemetery inside the West Bank? Is that what we're talking about? Are those terrorists? Who gets to decide that is the definition of terrorists, folks? But it says here, the convicted terrorists would be incarcerated in a separate detention facility and would be not allowed to receive visitors except for authorized personnel. Their meetings with lawyers would be conducted exclusively by video conference rather than in person. And it goes on to say the bill stipulates that the identities of the executing guards will remain confidential and they will be granted full criminal immunity. So we're allowed Israel to come into what is supposed to be, I guess, an autonomous zone, which is the West Bank, right, which goes beyond their said borders. And we're going to allow them to determine who is a terrorist in this region, which again is a mess, by the way. And we're going to allow them to hang these people. But yet, if there's hangings inside Iran for people that are paid off by the CIA, by Mossad, if there's any type of execution, that it's totally fine for the United States to go in and start attacking them. Does that make any sense to anybody listening right now? Again, I'm fully aware of people, obviously, being held for an account by their actions. I don't disavow that. The people commit crimes, of course. But the term terrorist is the term that I'm confused with here. Who are we calling a terrorist? That's the big question. Is anyone they arrest a terrorist? And they should be put to death within 90 days? That's the question we need to ask ourselves, folks. And only time will tell if this goes through. But I think it's funny, to an extent, that Israel can determine who's a terrorist, hang them within 90 days. But if Iranians find paid protesters seeking to overturn the government, if they do anything to these people, that is called for military action. I just find it a little bit hypocritical, don't you? Folks, thanks again for being here. I appreciate you so much. Hope you enjoy your weekend. Have a blessed weekend. Share the show with some friends. Always stay prepped, as always, self-sufficient. And I'll see you back here on Monday for more groundbreaking news on the next Marco Dre Show. Until then, be good, stay busy. God bless.